One village's survival depended on ignoring the stars. Elara, a young stargazer burning with curiosity, chose to defy this ancient taboo. Night after night, she secretly sketched the celestial alignments, convinced they held the answer to the relentless drought, starving her people. Her actions risked permanent exile, placing her on a direct collision course with the elders who guarded this forbidden knowledge. By the end of this journey, you will understand how cosmic cycles have silently shaped human destiny, and how one person's courage can recalibrate the fate of an entire world. What secret did the stars whisper that was worth such a terrible risk? I would love to know where you are listening from and what the sky looks like there tonight. What is one mystery about the universe you have always wanted to solve? The brittle stones of Whispering Ridge shifted under her feet with every careful step. A cold wind, the only voice on that barren peak, whipped stray strands of hair across Elara's face as she unrolled her grandfather's fragile star charts. The parchment felt like a secret in her hands, a map of ghosts. She held her breath, her gaze fixed on the heavens, waiting for the moment the twin serpents would finally drink from the silver river. When the alignment clicked into place, a perfect celestial lock, her charcoal moved swiftly across her own parchment, tracing the familiar patterns. Then her hand froze. There, nestled within the tail of the lower serpent, was a pinprick of light her grandfather's charts showed as empty black, a star that simply did not belong. A jolt, both electric and cold, shot through her. This was either a miraculous sign or a monstrous error, and her entire world had no room for anything in between. The crunch of a boot on gravel shattered the silence. She dropped flat against the cold rock, her heart hammering against her ribs. The broad silhouette of Kale, captain of the Night Watch, passed so close she could smell the oil on his leather armor. He paused, scanning the ridge with a hunter's patience, his presence a physical weight in the air. Elara squeezed her eyes shut, praying to the very stars she was defying. After an eternity, he moved on, his footsteps fading into the night. She remained pressed to the stone, the anomaly seared into her mind. Confessing this to the elders would mean immediate exile. There was only one person left who might understand, a man spoken of in whispers, the Reclusive Archivist Lysander. It was a desperate gamble. To seek him out was to step fully into the shadows, to embrace the path of a heretic. She slipped back into the sleeping village as the first hint of gray touched the eastern sky, the folded chart a secret fire against her skin. Her personal risk was now a debt owed by her entire family. If she was wrong, their name would be forever shamed. But if she was right, if that impossible star was a key, it could unlock the reins and save them all. The decision was made. She would find the archivist, a man who had not been seen in years, a man who might already be a ghost himself. As she vanished into the narrow lanes, she did not feel the gaze from the high window of the Elder's Lodge, a gaze that had tracked her return and now watched with calculating stillness. The sunken library was a wound in the earth, a place where stone and memory had collapsed in on themselves. Elara picked her way down the crumbling stairwell, the air growing thick with the smell of damp earth and old paper. Whispers of vengeful spirits coiled in the back of her mind, but the only ghosts here were the skeletal remains of bookshelves and the profound, heavy silence. Deeper she went, into a chamber where the ceiling was held up by the roots of ancient trees, their gnarled fingers cradling the last intact archive of a forgotten age. And there, moving with a purpose that defied his years, was Archivist Lysander. He was not the frail relic of stories, but a man of sharp eyes and steady hands, meticulously cleaning a stone tablet with a soft brush. He looked up, his gaze not surprised but weary, as if he had long expected a visitor bringing trouble. Before she could speak, he saw the chart in her trembling hand, and his expression hardened into a wall of ice. "You have brought a storm down upon us, child. That mark you found is not a new star. It is a fracture, a crack in the great mechanism that turns the skies." His voice was low and urgent, laced with a fear that was far older than the library itself. He spoke of the Clockwork's silent guardians, beings of pure order who would not hesitate to erase a flawed world to preserve the cosmic design. "Your curiosity is a spark in a room full of gunpowder. You should never have come here." Elara felt the weight of his words, a crushing pressure that threatened to extinguish her hope. But she did not plead or argue. Instead, she bowed her head, not in submission, but in respect. "I do not seek to break the machine," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "I seek to understand it, so I can help mend it. My village is dying. Please, teach me." She unrolled her chart fully on his work table, laying her ignorance bare beside her discovery. It was this act of humility, this admission that she was a student and not a savior, that finally made the ice in his eyes thaw. He saw not a reckless youth, but a potential apprentice. A deep sigh escaped him, the sound of a heavy burden being shared. He nodded, his decision made. "The drought you suffer is but the first whisper of a greater silence," he explained, his finger tracing the path of the phantom star. "If this fracture widens, the gears of heaven could seize. Spring would never come again. Summer would burn the land to ash, and then the cold would remain, eternal and unyielding. Our world would become a single, frozen moment in time." He moved to a locked cabinet, retrieving scrolls so ancient the parchment felt like dried leaves. As Lysander unrolled these older, more complex star maps, a single diagram glowed with intricate silver ink. "Our only hope is to recalibrate the system at its source. To do that, we must first find the Prism of Alignment." He tapped the illustration of a multifaceted crystal. The ancients used it to focus celestial light and repair minor dissonances, but it was lost ages ago, hidden away when mankind grew fearful of the power. The last known record places it deep within the shifting crystalline caves. Our path is set. The singing deserts earned their name with every step, the fine silica sand shifting underfoot with a soft, musical hum that felt both beautiful and deeply unsettling. For days, Elara and Lysander trekked beneath a merciless sun. Their only compass the star charts, she now consulted with growing confidence. He taught her to read the whispers of the wind-sculpted dunes and to spot the almost invisible trails of nocturnal creatures, lessons that wove a new and powerful bond between them. In the deep silence of the desert nights, the old archivist seemed to shed years, his eyes gleaming with a long-forgotten fire as he shared tales of his own youthful expeditions. Their fragile peace was shattered on the third evening. Figures emerged from the shimmering heat haze, silent as shadows, their forms cloaked in dust-colored robes. The sand singers surrounded them, their leader stepping forward, a curved blade gleaming in the low light. His voice was a dry rasp, demanding a toll of starlight for the right to cross their ancestral lands. A tense silence fell, the threat of violence hanging thick in the air. Lysander moved to speak, but Elara stepped forward, her heart pounding against her ribs. She met the leader's gaze, her voice steady. "I have no starlight to give you, but I can offer a story the stars themselves have forgotten." She proposed a trade, a tale of the lost constellation, known as the Weaver's Shuttle, for their safe passage. Suspicion warred with curiosity in the singer's eyes, but he gave a curt nod. So, under the emerging canopy of the desert sky, Elara began to speak. She wove a narrative of cosmic creation and sacrifice, her words painting pictures in the dark. As she spoke, the sand singers slowly settled around her, their harsh postures softening. When she finished, the leader was silent for a long moment. "You carry old knowledge," he said finally, his tone now one of wary respect. "It is a currency we value. You may pass." The encounter was a profound revelation for Elara. She understood now that their mission was not just about fixing a broken sky for one village, but about mending the frayed connections between the heavens and all the peoples who lived beneath them. With a new story, now part of the singer's own lore, the duo continued their journey, the distant, shimmering peaks of the Crystalline caves, calling them toward a deeper and more ancient danger. The entrance to the Crystalline caves was not a dark maw, but a wall of shimmering, disorienting light. Stepping inside was like being submerged in a frozen rainbow, where every surface fractured their reflections into 1,000 scattered pieces. Sound became a weapon here, a single footstep echoing into a percussive roar that battered their ears. Mirages flickered at the edges of their vision, tantalizing pools of water that vanished when they reached out, or the faint, beckoning call of a loved one's voice. They moved in a tight, wordless formation, communicating only with touches and gestures, their survival dependent on absolute trust. The path was not one of stone, but of perception, the angles of the crystals shifting subtly to lead them in circles. It was Lysander who first saw the terrifying geometry in the walls, the perfect 90-degree angles and repeating patterns that spoke of intelligent design. "This is not a cave," he signed, his hands trembling slightly. "It is a vault, and we have just triggered the lock." A deep groan resonated through the chamber, a sound of ancient machinery grinding to life. The floor beneath Elara's feet tilted violently, a massive crystal slab sliding sideways to create a chasm. She leaped back, but the wall behind her shifted, hurting her away from Lysander. She shouted his name, but the crystals drank the sound, amplifying it into a deafening shriek that isolated her completely. In a heartbeat, he was gone, and she was alone in a chamber of mirrors. But these mirrors did not show her face. They showed her deepest fears. One panel reflected her village, the wells dry, and the people she loved collapsed in the dust, their eyes accusing her. Another showed the star chart anomaly exploding, shattering the sky into 1,000,000 dark fragments. The images were so vivid, so visceral, that she felt the heat of the dying sun and the chill of eternal night. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the panic a living thing clawing at her throat. To fail here was to prove the elders right, to confirm that her curiosity was a destructive force. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the tidal wave of despair. Logic, she told herself. The caves react to fear. They are a psychological trap. She forced her eyes open, focusing not on the horrific scenes, but on the tiny, impossible details. The dust in her reflected village did not move when the wind howled. The shattered sky did not change, its fragments frozen in place like a painting. They are only reflections of my doubt, not reality. She took a deliberate step forward, and the terrifying images wavered. She walked straight through the illusion of her dying father, her heart breaking but her will unyielding, and the crystal wall dissolved into a simple, empty corridor. Meanwhile, Lysander found himself sealed in a small, octagonal room. In its center, a pedestal held a complex orrery of glowing crystal spheres. A single, resonant tone filled the air, and a phrase materialized in light on the wall before him. Speak the flaw in your greatest work. The air grew heavy, the walls beginning to inch inward. This was the true test of an archivist, a demand for a confession he had buried for decades. He thought of the grand celestial calendar he had designed for the capital, a work of stunning beauty and precision, and he thought of the single, critical miscalculation that had caused it to fail on its inaugural night, a humiliation that had sent him into self-imposed exile. His pride warred with the crushing pressure. To speak it aloud was to relive the shame, to define his life by that one moment of failure. But he thought of Elara, alone in this labyrinth, and the greater failure that awaited them all if he remained silent. His voice, when it came, was a raw whisper. I was arrogant. I valued elegance over empirical proof. My calendar was beautiful, but it was wrong. The moment the admission left his lips, the oppressive tone ceased. The orrery on the pedestal shimmered and realigned itself into a perfect, harmonious model. A hidden door slid open, and there stood Elara, her face pale, but her eyes clear. They had each faced the guardian of their own making and emerged stronger. The final chamber was a sanctuary of silence. There, suspended in the very center of the cavern, without any visible support, was the Prism of Alignment. It was a teardrop of solidified light, its facets casting soft, shifting rainbows that danced peacefully across the walls. It pulsed with a gentle, inviting warmth, a promise of restoration. But as they approached, a new sound began to filter into the quiet. A rhythmic, metallic, scraping from the tunnels behind them, slow, deliberate, and far too close. The rhythmic scraping sharpened into the distinct sound of armored boots on crystal. Kale and his guards were here. There is no time for a gentle approach, Elara. The prism responds to harmony, not force, Lysander said, his voice a low, urgent whisper against the growing clamor. You must perform the alignment dance. Now, he began to chant the ancient sequences, his words painting patterns in the air. Every movement must be exact, a physical echo of the celestial order. Elara's heart hammered a frantic, disordered rhythm against her ribs. She closed her eyes for a single second, pushing back the fear, and then she began to move. Her body became an instrument, her arms tracing the arcs of forgotten constellations, her feet pivoting with the precision of orbiting worlds. It was a language written not in words, but in motion, a plea to the universe for balance. As she danced, the prism's gentle pulse began to synchronize with her own heartbeat. The chaotic rainbows it cast coalesced into a single, brilliant beam of white light that enveloped her. A wave of pure, Crystalline knowledge flooded her senses, and she understood, for a breathtaking moment, how the great gears of the sky interlocked. She reached out, her fingers not grabbing, but accepting. The prism floated into her palm, its warmth spreading up her arm and settling deep within her chest. A faint, silvery luminescence bloomed across her skin, an undeniable mark of her new role. She was now the prism's temporary custodian. The moment the artifact left its suspension, the cavern answered with a deafening roar. Great fissures snaked across the walls, and shards of crystal began to rain down like falling stars. Through the chaos, Kale's voice cut like a blade. Blasphemers, you steal from the gods themselves. Seize them. Lysander met Elara's horrified gaze. His eyes held no fear, only a fierce, proud resolve. He shoved the star charts into her pack. The plateau, he said firmly, go. Then he turned, raising his hands not in surrender, but in a final, defiant act of distraction, shouting to draw the guards' attention solely to him. Elara did not hesitate. His sacrifice carved a path through her grief, and she fled, the prism a burning promise against her back. She burst from the collapsing caves into the blinding desert sun, no longer a curious stargazer, but a fugitive branded by celestial light. Her own people would now hunt her for possessing the very thing that could spare them a slow, silent death. The weight of the prism was nothing compared to the weight of Lysander's trust. She was utterly alone, with a world to save and no guide but the maps in her pack and the ghost of a constellation in her mind. She adjusted the pack on her shoulders, the artifact within pulsing with a soft, steady rhythm, a lonely metronome counting the steps toward the one place where the sky could be reached. Her destination was the Starfall Plateau, where the heavens were said to touch the earth. The prism became her only true companion in the long, cold nights. It glowed softly in her palm, its light not just illuminating the physical path through jagged canyons and thorn-choked forests, but casting an invisible trail only she could follow. She learned to trust its gentle, insistent pull more than her own eyes, for it guided her away from Kale's patrols with an uncanny precision, leading her to hidden game trails and forgotten passes. This was not mere starlight navigation. It was a conversation with the cosmos itself. The artifact began to change her sight. The world took on a new layer, a shimmering tapestry of energy. She saw the faint, silver threads that tethered the oldest trees to distant constellations, and the pulsing, wounded aura of a dried-up riverbed, its connection to the silver river above frayed and thin. But this new vision came with a price. Flashes of potential futures would seize her without warning. One moment, she was drinking from a stream. The next, she was witnessing that same stream swell into a raging flood that swept her away. Another vision showed the Chasm of Echoes bridge collapsing under her weight, a premonition so vivid she could feel the stone crumble beneath her boots. These glimpses were not prophecies, but possibilities, and the weight of choosing the correct path became a constant, dizzying burden. It was at the Chasm of Echoes that possibility became a deadly reality. The narrow stone bridge was the only way across, and as she stepped onto its weathered span, a search party emerged from the trees behind her, cutting off her retreat. Kale stood at their head, his expression grim. There is nowhere left to run, Elara. The artifact has corrupted you. Surrender it, and your exile may yet be merciful. She stood trapped, the bottomless drop yawning on either side, the visions of the collapsing bridge screaming in her mind. She could fight, a futile gesture against so many, or she could surrender and condemn her world to silence. Then a different vision bloomed behind her eyes, one the prism seemed to gift her directly, a future of vibrant green under a healed, harmonious sky. The choice was clear. She would not fight them, and she would not surrender. She would transcend their understanding entirely. Closing her eyes, she raised the prism high. It flared, not with a blinding flash, but with a focused, purposeful light. The very starlight from above bent and solidified, weaving itself into a glimmering, translucent pathway that arched over the chasm, a bridge woven from cosmic will. Without a backward glance, she stepped onto the light. It held firm beneath her feet, humming with the same energy that now coursed through her veins. She crossed the impossible gap as the guards watched, their weapons lowered, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. By the time Kale roared the order to pursue, the bridge of light had dissolved into 1,000 fading sparks, leaving only a legend in its wake. Word of the Starlight Walker spread faster than she could travel. In hidden villages, she was spoken of as a sign of hope, a new kind of guardian. In the halls of power, she was branded a rogue element, a dangerous heretic wielding powers humanity was never meant to touch. And in a secluded observatory, carved into a distant mountain peak, a secretive order known as the Horologists noted her progress. They were the self-appointed watchmakers of the celestial clockwork, and a fracture was a thing they could not ignore. An agent was dispatched to observe, and if necessary, to intervene. Exhausted but unbroken, Elara finally scrambled up the last rocky incline and into the foothills of the Starfall Plateau. The very air here felt different, thinner and charged with potential. Below her, the world lay spread out like one of Lysander's maps. Above, the sky seemed closer, the stars brighter and more numerous than she had ever seen. In her hand, the Prism of Alignment began to hum with a new, urgent frequency, its light pulsing in time with her own quickening heartbeat. It could feel what she could not, the slow, inexorable turning of a great celestial gear. A convergence was coming, a moment when the sky would be perfectly aligned for recalibration. The final test was rushing toward her, and the entire mechanism of the world held its breath. The Starfall Plateau was a vast, flat stone disk held up to the heavens, a perfect stage for a cosmic performance. Elara worked with a frantic calm, placing the prism at the center of the ancient alignment circles etched into the rock. Above, the sky churned with sickly purples and corrosive greens, the beautiful constellations she had charted now twisting in visible agony. The air itself tasted of ozone and iron. Just as she began the first chant, figures emerged from the path below. Kale and his guards stood at the edge of the plateau, but their swords remained sheathed. Kale stepped forward, his face etched with a profound exhaustion that had nothing to do with the climb. The drought has claimed the last of the eastern springs, Elara. The elders are desperate. They sent us to ask, not to arrest. They will listen if you can truly mend the sky. The plea was more disarming than any attack. Before she could answer, the prism flared, a shriek of light that cracked the very air. A jagged fissure appeared along one of its facets. The malfunction was far worse than Lysander had feared. The clockwork was not just out of sync, it was tearing itself apart, To force a recalibration now would require a conduit for the chaotic energies, a focus that would almost certainly be destroyed in the process. Her own life offered freely, but as she looked from the terrified guards to the breaking prism, a different idea sparked. She could not do this alone. She turned to Kale, her voice cutting through the howling wind. I need your strength, all of you, not as warriors, but as anchors. I will teach you the rhythms. Help me ground this power, or we all fall. Suspicion warred with duty in his eyes, but he gave a sharp nod, barking orders to his men. She quickly guided them into a circle around the prism, placing their hands on each other's shoulders, creating a human chain. She poured the basic principles of celestial harmony into them, simple concepts of balance and flow. Their disciplined minds, trained for order, grasped the fundamentals, and a shaky, collective focus began to form. The unstable vortex above them pulsed, threatening to rip open and unleash a storm of raw creation and destruction upon the world. Their unified will became a tether, holding the madness at bay, but the strain was immense. The ground trembled, and the prism's light flickered erratically. Just as Elara felt her own strength beginning to fail, a new light bloomed at the edge of the plateau. From its heart stepped Archivist Lysander, freed and weary, but with a fire in his eyes she had never seen. You have done the impossible, he said, his voice carrying over the maelstrom. But patching the symptoms is not enough. The heart of the clockwork itself, the Orrery of Eternity, is failing. This chaos is just the tremor from its dying beat. The Orrery of Eternity was not a metaphor, but a physical engine, and it was failing. Lysander's declaration hung in the air, a truth more terrifying than any storm. Its collapse would not be a slow silence, but a final, violent shattering of reality itself. The only hope was a desperate journey to the one place where the sky was solid ground, the moving islands of the sky, Mist Archipelago. For the first time, they were not a stargazer, an archivist, and a soldier, but a single, united team. Kale immediately began assessing their resources, his tactical mind mapping the impossible ascent. Elara unrolled her charts, her new celestial sight blending with his old knowledge to plot a course through the treacherous air currents. Their path upward, however, depended on a force that could not be charted or commanded. The storm riders circled the plateau's peak, vast living forms of condensed cloud and lightning, their wings stirring the mists with a sound like distant thunder. They were creatures of pure, untamed energy, and they would only carry those they deemed worthy. As the others watched with held breath, Elara stepped forward, the prism glowing warmly in her hand. She did not speak with words, but opened her mind, offering the lead creature a vision of what they sought. Not dominion, but balance. She shared the feeling of harmonious orbits, of stars tracing their perfect, ancient paths, of a cosmos healed and whole. The storm rider's turbulent form stilled, a single, massive eye of calm blue sky opening within the tempest of its body. It understood. With a low rumble that was both acknowledgement and invitation, it descended, allowing them to climb onto its broad, misty back. The ascent was a battle against a dying machine's immune system. Errant pockets of gravity snatched at them, trying to pull them into the void. Shimmering fragments of broken stars, like celestial shrapnel from the growing fracture, streaked past their heads. Each near miss was a stark reminder that the clockwork's decay was now actively lashing out, threatening not just them, but the unsuspecting world far below. Then, with a final surge, their noble mount broke through the cloud layer, depositing them gently on the moss-covered stone of the lowest floating isle. The air was thin and humming with latent power. Before them, a labyrinth of earth and rock stretched upward into the heavens, a staggering staircase of islands, each floating at its own unique altitude. Some were close enough to leap to, while others drifted lazily in the distance, connected by faint, shimmering bridges of light. At the very apex, shrouded in a permanent, softly glowing haze, was their destination. The Orrery of Eternity awaited, and they could feel the gaze of its final, most loyal guardians already upon them. The air on the first floating island tasted of cold stone and ozone. Each step was a commitment, for the ground beneath their feet felt both solid and unnervingly transient. The archipelago was a living orrery, a grand puzzle where every mossy stone and drifting isle was a piece of moving celestial machinery. To reach the central spire, they had to become part of its dance. The first challenge was a chasm separating their island from the next, but the stepping stones were not stationary. They floated in a slow, elliptical pattern, their movements a perfect echo of a distant planetary orbit. Kale immediately began calculating trajectories, his soldier's mind seeking a direct, efficient path. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm of the stones through the soles of her boots, her stargazer's intuition sensing the underlying harmony. He saw a problem to be solved. She heard a song to be joined. Their first attempts were a study in friction. Kale's logical route was interrupted by a stone that drifted off its predicted course, forcing a frantic leap. Elara's intuitive path meandered, costing them precious time. Tension simmered in the thin air. "We are running out of both time and sky," Kale stated, his voice tight with frustration. "We cannot afford your poetic wandering, and we cannot force a melody with a hammer," Elara shot back, her own patience fraying. It was Lysander, observing from the sidelines, who offered the crucial insight. "You are both correct, and you are both wrong. The clockwork is built on both perfect mathematics and profound beauty. You must use both eyes to see the whole path." The truth of his words settled over them. Swallowing their pride, Kale and Elara agreed to a new strategy. He would map the visible patterns, the angles and speeds, while she would listen for the silent music that guided them. He called out positions. She sensed the moments of shift, and together they navigated the puzzle, step by synchronized step. This hard-won cooperation revealed more than just a path. On a larger island that moved with the stately pace of a gas giant, they found the ruins of a library. Its stone shelves were empty, its scrolls long since crumbled to dust, but the murals on the walls told a haunting story. They depicted other figures, from civilizations they could not even name, attempting the same ascent. Some were dressed in crystalline armor, others in robes of woven light. All of them had failed. They were not the first to try to mend the sky, Elara whispered, the realization a cold weight in her stomach. We are simply the last. The stakes became terrifyingly personal as they climbed higher. A sudden, silent lurch in reality made the world flicker. For a single, nauseating heartbeat, Elara was back on the first island. Kale was mid-stride about to leap again, and Lysander was speaking a sentence he had already finished. Then the moment snapped back. Time itself was stuttering, skipping like a cracked gear. Down below, in their village, people would be experiencing lost conversations, repeated sunsets, moments of their lives simply erased and replayed. The clockwork's failure was no longer an abstract celestial breakdown. It was stealing the very seconds of existence from everyone they loved. This shared horror forged their unity into something unbreakable. The final puzzle was a ring of 7 small islands, each representing a different phase of a long-dead moon. They had to be activated in a sequence that was both astronomically correct and emotionally resonant. Kale provided the order from his tactical memory of lunar cycles, while Elara infused each step with the corresponding feeling from her star lore, the hope of the new moon, the fulfillment of the full. As the last island clicked into place, the air hummed, and from the center of the ring, a bridge of pure, solidified moonlight crystallized into being, arcing gracefully toward the central spire. It led to the heart of all things. There, in a silent, sacred space, the Orrery of Eternity spun. It was a sphere of impossible size, woven from galaxies and gears, its surface a map of every star they had ever known. But its majestic rhythm was broken. Deep within its core, they could hear the agonized groan of metal under cosmic strain, and see a dark, spiderweb crack spreading slowly across its face. Silence filled the chamber of the orrery, a profound stillness deeper than any they had ever known. The air itself seemed to be made of polished space, and in the center hung the great engine of creation, a sphere of interlocking gears wrought from nebulae and polished bone white moon rock. Planets the size of their heads drifted in perfect, soundless orbits, and constellations of diamond dust sparkled within the machinery. The harmony was breathtaking, yet beneath it, they all felt the dissonance, a low, grinding vibration that made their teeth ache. Their eyes were drawn to the very core, where a central gear, carved from a single piece of deep blue crystal, pulsed with a faint, sickly light. A jagged crack ran through its center, and with each labored rotation, the fracture widened infinitesimally. This was the Heartstone, the anchor point of all existence. Lysander's breath caught. To even approach it requires a consciousness in perfect resonance with the cosmos, he whispered, his voice swallowed by the immense quiet. A mind free of selfish desire, Kale looked from the cracked stone to Elara, understanding dawning in his eyes. It has to be you. But the moment her purpose focused on the Heartstone, the chamber awoke. From the swirling galactic dust of the orrery, a figure coalesced, a being woven from strands of captured starlight and cold, unforgiving logic. It was the Sentinel, the final guardian, and its voice was the chill of the void between worlds. You are mortals. Your history is a chronicle of error and short-sighted hunger. You break what you do not understand. To grant you access to the heart is to invite a faster, more deliberate demise. I cannot permit it. Elara did not raise the prism in defense. Instead, she took a step forward, making herself utterly vulnerable before the celestial warden. She met its luminous, unblinking gaze. You are right, she said, her voice clear in the vastness. We are flawed. We feel fear and pride, but we also feel love for our world and a responsibility to the future. That is the choice. Let one flawed mortal try to heal the wound and accept the risk that comes with her, or allow the certainty of total collapse. The Sentinel was silent, its form flickering as it processed her words, weighing her singular intention against the entire, tragic history of her species. Then, without a word, it bowed its head and dissolved back into the star stuff from which it came. The path was clear. The true cost of the repair now became terrifyingly personal. Lysander explained, his face pale. The prism is the tool, but you must become the conduit. You must channel its energy directly through your own life force to mend the Heartstone. If your focus wavers for even a second, if a single selfish thought intrudes, the feedback could scour your mind clean, leaving your body an empty vessel. You would forget your name, your village, everyone you have ever loved. Elara looked at the faces of her companions, at the world she could see spinning far below through the crystalline floor, and she made her choice. She reached for the Heartstone. The moment her fingers brushed the fractured crystal, the Orrery's light did not just intensify, it poured into her. She was no longer a woman standing in a room. She was a nexus point for the universe. She felt the crushing gravity of 1,000 suns and the delicate orbital dance of 1 billion moons. The birth of new stars was a fire in her blood, and the slow, cold death of ancient galaxies was a sorrow in her soul. It was a symphony of forces so vast and complex that her human mind strained at its very edges, a sensation of absolute terror and divine transcendence, fused into one overwhelming moment. And in the heart of that storm, she had to find the quiet note of her own will, the single, steady thread that was Elara, and begin to sing the universe back into tune. Her fingers met the cold, fractured surface of the Heartstone, and the universe flooded in. The prism in her other hand blazed, becoming a funnel for a power that was both creation and destruction. She was no longer a woman mending a machine. She was the needle, and her thread was the raw stuff of galaxies. Around her, Kale, Lysander, and the guards locked arms, their circle a fragile dam against the psychic shockwaves roaring from the Orrery's core. They braced as residual energies, like phantom limbs of dying stars, lashed out, their disciplined unity the only thing keeping the ritual from exploding into chaos. Inside Elara, a feedback loop ignited. Her consciousness was ripped from the confines of her body and hurled into the clockwork itself. She was not just seeing history, she was living it. She felt the first, silent expansion of nothing into something, the violent, beautiful birth of the earliest suns, the slow, patient cooling of planets into worlds that could cradle life. She witnessed the rise and fall of empires whose names were dust, felt the joys and sorrows of countless souls who had lived and loved beneath this same, turning sky. And then she saw the futures, not as one path, but as a shimmering web of possibility. She saw Kale's daughter growing into a leader of a renewed village, saw Lysander's forgotten calendar being rediscovered and celebrated as a work of genius, saw the sand singers weaving her story into their eternal desert songs. The weight of it all was infinite, a tidal wave of awareness, threatening to dissolve the tiny, singular concept of Elara into the endless ocean of the cosmos. In the physical chamber, the strain was immense. The floor buckled, and arcs of wild energy snapped at the protective circle. "Hold fast," Kale roared, his voice a rock in the storm. For her, they dug in, their shared purpose a tangible force against the Orrery's death throes. It was this very connection, this echo of their loyalty and sacrifice, that found its way into the maelstrom within Elara. Amid the swirling visions of cosmic dawn and celestial empires, a simpler, brighter memory surfaced, the taste of water from her village's well on a hot day. The scent of old parchment and ink in Lysander's library, the grudging respect in Kale's eyes when she crossed the chasm of light. These were not grand cosmic events, but they were hers. They were human. She had a choice, to merge with the infinite and become a silent, timeless witness, or to embrace the beautiful, fleeting mess of a mortal life. With a surge of will that felt like tearing her own soul in two, she chose the village over the void. She wrapped her consciousness around those precious, personal memories and pulled. Her awareness slammed back into her body with a jolt that shook the chamber. A final, pure tone, clear as a bell, resonated from the Heartstone. The crack sealed itself with a flash of brilliant gold, and the orrery's sickly groan transformed into a deep, steady, harmonious hum. The violent shaking ceased. As the light from the prism faded, Elara collapsed to her knees, gasping. She was whole, she was herself, but she was irrevocably changed. When she looked up, her friends saw it immediately. Her eyes now held a faint, silver starlight deep within them, and her gaze seemed to hold the patience of orbiting worlds. She understood balance in her bones, the way one understands breathing. Then, a new sound reached them, a gentle, rhythmic patter against the crystalline outer shell of the spire. Far below, on the parched and waiting earth, rain began to fall. It was not a storm, but a soft, steady, life-giving shower, the first in years. The very air in the chamber shifted, growing lighter, sweeter, as if a fever had broken. They had done it. The great celestial clock was ticking true once more, and the world below was drinking its first deep breath of hope. The descent felt like a slow, gentle dream after the violent symphony of the orrery. The storm riders carried them down through the mists on currents of warm, moist air, their forms now radiating a deep, contented hum that harmonized with the world below. And the world itself was singing a new song. From their aerial vantage, they saw the proof of their success, painted across the land in vibrant greens and shimmering blues. Parched earth had softened into fertile soil, with the bright green tips of new crops pushing toward the sun. Riverbeds that had been dusty graves for years now ran with clear, rushing water, their laughter echoing up from the valleys. They were returning not to a village simply saved from drought, but to a world resurrected. Their arrival at the village was met with a celebration that shook the very ground. People wept with joy, pressing forward to touch their hands, to offer thanks, their faces filled with a reverence that was both humbling and overwhelming. Elara stood in the center of the adoring crowd, a smile fixed on her face, but she felt a million miles away. The cheers were muffled, as if heard from the bottom of a deep well. She could feel the individual blades of grass beneath her feet, each one connected to a complex web of soil, water, and celestial light that was now as clear to her as the lines on her own palm. A child offered her a cup of water, and as her fingers brushed the cool clay, a fleeting vision of the water's journey from a distant cloud to this very cup flashed behind her eyes. This was her new reality, a constant, overwhelming awareness of the cosmic and the commonplace. The village elders approached, their gratitude genuine, but their eyes shadowed with a deep, ingrained fear. They bowed to her, but it was the bow one offers a natural disaster, beautiful and powerful, but ultimately unpredictable and dangerous. "We owe you our lives," the head elder said, his voice cautious. But the power you wield, it is not for mortals to hold. We must learn to live as we always have. Elara understood their fear. She was a living reminder that their old ways, the traditions that had given them structure and safety, were built on a foundation of ignorance. She was no longer just one of them. She was the bridge to something vastly larger, and that knowledge created a subtle, unspoken chasm. That night, under a sky that now shone with a clarity and peace she had never known, she made her decision. She found Kale and Lysander watching the stars, their own lives forever intertwined with hers. "We cannot go back," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And they cannot be asked to fully understand. The clockwork is healed, but it is not unchanging. It needs guardians who can listen to its rhythms, who can spot a fracture before it becomes a cataclysm. I will found a new order. Kale, the people trust you. They need your strength to protect this new knowledge, not from the stars, but from our own fear and pride. Will you lead its protectors?" He met her gaze, the soldier who had hunted her now seeing a commander he would follow anywhere. He simply nodded. "And Lysander," she continued, turning to the archivist, "we need your wisdom to build the library of this new age. Not of forbidden knowledge, but of shared understanding. Will you be our chief scholar?" Lysander's smile was one of profound fulfillment. "The work begins anew," he said. And so, the Order of the Celestial Weavers was born, a fellowship of stargazers, warriors, and scholars, dedicated not to hiding from the heavens, but to living in conscious harmony with them. Elara had saved her village, but her purpose had expanded to encompass the entire, spinning world. It was a role of immense honor, and as she stood watching her first students begin their lessons, she felt the weight of its inherent isolation. Then a familiar, gentle pull tugged at the edge of her awareness. She looked up, and a single, distant star seemed to pulse in a rhythm only she could hear. The clockwork was eternal, and so too must be its guardians. The work was never truly done. The wind on Whispering Ridge no longer carried the taste of dust, but the clean scent of rain, drenched earth, and night-blooming flowers. Elara stood where her journey had truly begun, the same star charts, now resting peacefully in her hands. Beside her, Kale and Lysander watched the heavens with a quiet contentment, their shared history a silent bond between them. Below, the village glowed with warm lamplight, its fields lush and its wells full, a living testament to their impossible victory. The great clockwork above turned with a deep, resonant harmony they could all feel in their bones, a melody of perfect order. Yet Elara understood this harmony was not a fixed song, but a fragile composition that required constant listening. A single, selfish thought could introduce dissonance. A forgotten alignment could let a gear slip. Her new order of stargazers, weavers, and protectors existed not to control this music, but to be its most attentive audience, to hum along and correct the notes before they could stray. Her personal quest had ended, but it had birthed an eternal responsibility. She had learned that human destiny was not written in the stars, but woven in conversation with them. Our choices here on the ground send ripples upward, just as the celestial cycles guide the tides below. The legacy she leaves is not one of a fixed, perfect world, but of a world that knows how to heal itself, guarded by those who remember the price of silence. And as a new constellation, one the elders named the Weaver's Shuttle, traced its path across the zenith, Elara smiled. The clockwork was eternal, Its guardians were now eternal, and the story of balance was a tale with no end, only new chapters written in starlight. you.